My name's Diane, and I am a recovering adult child, and I'm actually grateful to be here. I actually had an experience of sharing a 45-minute evening share, and it was the first time I'd shared that long. I was like, this is a long ass time to talk and be listened to, but I got through it, and like a lot of things in my life, the first time I do it is always the worst. And then I kind of desensitize myself. And so I'm like, this time I'm like, I kind of got bored hearing myself talk. So I'm going to not do my whole story, in a linear fashion because that's what I did the first time. I thought I'd focus a few things and then talk about the relationship issues because what I want to share with you today and welcome anybody who's new. Welcome anybody who didn't announce that they were new. I was really that person that, never didn't want you to know I was even in the room, let alone say I'm new here and have you go, hey, hi, it's like, ugh, don't come up to me. Um, but anyway, I really hope that you hear something that helps you identify with us. And if not, keep coming back because sooner or later somebody will share something that really helps you to realize, hey, I'm in the right place. So, um, yeah, I wanted to say that I like metaphors and I feel like it's the language of my inner child. And I saw a little short video on this man who went around helping hermit crabs. And apparently, hermit crabs, people are picking up the shells. And so they don't really, they kind of outgrow their shells. And so these hermit crabs were walking around with little plastic caps and things like that that they had to make their home. And he would go and find some really pretty shells and change it out for that hermit crab to give up his plastic, junk that he was in. And then, get a nice little shell. So, what I'm sharing with you today is the awareness of 14 years of working on my adult child issues. I did not come to know what I know today the first day I got here. It took me years and years, and I'm still learning things, but I'm going to say it as if like this program taught me all of that instantly, but it didn't. It was a very long, slow process. So I feel like my little hermit crab is been changed out a number of times, and I'm a full-grown hermit crab. And I say hermit crab because really that's my internal sense is like I really prefer solitude. I feel safest. My nervous system feels happiest when I'm not in the presence of other human beings. That's a cause from my childhood. And growing up, I kind of felt like a feral cat. That was my other metaphor was, it felt like there's this essential bonding experience that's supposed to happen, and that somehow, as this little feral cat, I didn't get that initial bonding situation. And so I am feral. And that's been really hard to accept because, I really, really, really wanted to fit in. I wanted to find people. I wanted to connect. I wanted to feel loved, and I did not. So, but what I showed on the outside was not that little feral cat. I hid her and covered up, and I was very smart and observant, and I just noticed how the world worked, and that's how I operated was um, just to watch how things worked and try to, you know, mentally figure out what to do. So I guess the other little metaphor I would have is in the world of interacting was like a little pit bull. Maybe not a full grown one, but a little pit bull, because in my family, it was very angry and violent and chaotic, and you were on your own. Like there was no protection, there was no safety. You pretty much had to do what you needed to do and take care of yourself. And so I think a lot of women, when it comes to fight or flight, really learn flight. But in my family, I felt like the doors were locked and nobody was getting out. And so you either fought or you died. And so I became a very aggressive little kid, and didn't know that that was the way I was. It was like a survival thing. um yeah, so it was really difficult. My dad was the raging 6'2" alcoholic. My mom was compulsive overeating, very cold, very unloving, um codependent. So those were their two, and their dynamic together was to just yell and scream and call each other the most hideous things I've ever heard people speak to each other, and still just continue to stay together. Like they stayed together until my dad died. I was like, oh my God. But yeah, in that craziness, my dad was scary. He was 6'2". He'd do the whip the belt off thing. I grew up with, just a lot of terror of him, even though he, for some reason, felt like because you're a girl, you shouldn't get beaten really badly. I witnessed him beating my brother, especially my middle brother, terribly. Um, and so I always just knew to be afraid of him, even though he somewhat liked me a little bit. It was like it wasn't a good payoff to get him to like me because my mom resented that he treated me differently. And so he was only home 2 days a week. He did a long haul truck driving thing. And so my mom was home 7 days a week. So she was going to make up for the fact that he, favored me as a girl. And so it was really not very fair, I thought, like just 2 days a week, can you be mean to me? And like that'll make up for it. But that's just not how it went. And yeah, so it was really chaotic and really scary and very unloving. My mom wasn't supposed to have children in the first place. And then she had my miracle brother, who I think because he was such a miracle that she really, was happy that he came. And he, out of all of us, turned out a little differently. He has social skills, he has friendships, people that he's known his whole life, very outgoing. And then my middle brother came along, and oh, whoops, I guess miracles keep happening. And were not prepared, and they weren't planning on getting married. I think they got married because she was pregnant. And my dad was already, blackout, crazy, raging alcoholic and sex addict. So I'm sure the marriage wasn't in a good shape. And then, like every 9 months, I came along, three. So I never felt wanted. I always felt like a burden. I always felt like, oh my God, that, I cost them money. They have to spend medical stuff. They don't want to fix, my teeth. They don't want to. It was just really this sense of not being bonded or connected. And I didn't learn until way late in my recovery that that initial attachment and the physical abuse caused me to be an avoidant, anxious, attached person, which I didn't know what that meant, but all I know is that I had really difficult times trusting human beings. I didn't trust my mom or my dad, and they told me that I shouldn't trust anybody outside of the house. So it was like, oh my God, where do I go for help? Um, my nervous system was whacked from the beginning. I was probably 20 years old before somebody like reaching up to touch their hair didn't make me flinch, because there was so much of that backhanding stuff. And um, I was hyper vigilant to the max. And, it wasn't enough that I was hyper vigilant. When I drank, I did speed. So like I didn't want to like be out of it when I'm drinking. I want to be with it when I'm drinking. And that was the only way I could kind of drink and continue to function. And really, I laugh because, I definitely was a drug addict and definitely was a alcoholic, but I never thought of myself that way because I was trying to function, for God's sake. I wasn't trying to escape life. I was trying to do life. Um, so yeah, the fight, flight, nervous system. I guess I wanted to just go through the relationship crashes that my ACA issues, because when I got here, I didn't know what was wrong, and I thought, that it was just because I was an addict and that I had several addictions that was my problem. But I originally arrived at Al-Anon adult children because a therapist had referred me there, even though I didn't have any active addicts in my life, except maybe myself and, other people that were sober now. Um, because I have a problem with perfectionism. And so that was the first time in my life when I got to Al-Anon that I realized I had been affected by being raised by addiction and that I couldn't outthink it, outrun it, and overcome it. And I thought if I just overcame all my multiple whack-a-mole addictions, that I'd be I've suddenly, the windows would part and I would have good relationships. But I didn't know how badly that not being loved, not being wanted, and the physical abuse and the emotional abuse. The physical abuse wasn't as bad as the emotional abuse, and that contemptuous look at when they looked at me. I didn't get the loving look. I got the contempt look, and it was like, ugh. Even to this day, if somebody gives me that eye rolling thing, it's like, ugh, I just can't hardly tolerate it. I have to hold myself and go, it's all right. It's okay. Um, but yeah, so when I got to Al-Anon, which was, way past the AA, NA, and then eventually OA, because like that was an issue. I was like, oh wow. And it was the first time that I had to face that I did bad behavior and I had some survival behaviors that were really just about what I had been raised in. It was like it wasn't because I was impaired. It was just because I had some dysfunction based on what happened to me. And I had so much internalized shame and self-hate that was like asking me to peel off a layer of my skin. I was like, I don't think I'm going to survive this, especially without any anesthesia. But I did. And the sponsor I had was like super gentle and super safe. Like I just knew that she was, not going to hurt me and she wasn't going to share what I shared with other people. And so that was the beginning of it. And I went through, she was really thorough with her step work. So it took me a long time to get through the steps. I think we took 3 years and did everything from the big book to everything in between, and Joe and Charlie and Melody Beatty and on and on. So anyway, that was good. But what's interesting to me was at the end of it, I should have been wanting to help other people. It's like that's the 12th step. I got to the 12th step. I definitely had some relief from the bondage of self, but I didn't want to help other people. I didn't want to have relationships with other people. I wanted to go back to drinking. And that was like, oh my God, that's kind of interesting. And she stumbled into Codependence Anonymous, which she brought me to a meeting, which I thought, oh, I don't really relate to these people. They're so nice and they're so sweet. And none of them seem to have terrible backgrounds of addiction like I did. But the only requirement was a desire to have healthy and loving relationships. And I thought, I don't have any of those. So I definitely was interested. And so I hung out there for a year. And I do have to say that those people are a little more social than ACA. That was in person back at the time. And, I wanted to go camping. People, I'll go with you. I'm like, oh my gosh, and ACA, we didn't do that. We might have talked to each other, but we didn't like hang out and like instantly connect. So I was like, oh my goodness. But anyway, long story short, then she came up with ACA, and I was like, oh my God, Judy, another freaking program? I just can't take this. But that big red book, like, oh my God, it's like everything that I was me was like written in that book. And I didn't always relate to all of the laundry lists because I had some of those flip side laundry list things that I didn't even hear about till later. But that big red book really, locked me in, and I joined ACA, and I, locked and loaded, and and found that, okay, these are my people. This is where I belong. And even though it was uncomfortable being with other people, I just felt like I was safe here. So I niched in and, did the yellow workbook and, pretty much anything they had, I did. All the literature I read. I have to backtrack a little bit that part of my growing up in self-parenting, because the only self-parenting I had was food, which was my first little comforting addiction. Books. I taught myself everything I know by reading a book because I didn't know anything about anything. Thank God there's a few books on sex. I'm like, nobody said anything for me about that. I comforted myself with physical things. Like I had to have soft clothes because like that was like mothering to me, or I had to have a soft pillow, or so that was my only kind of mothering thing. But um, yeah, so when I got into ACA, it was kind of the first time I was like completely sober, completely, abstinent, and what came up was this big boiling bubble of self-hate. I didn't even know it was in there. Um, and that self-hate was like venomous. It was like you couldn't even get them to love you. It was like, ooh, wow. And it was like 3 pages long, and I read it to my then sponsor and then burned it. But I it was the first time I realized that at the basis of the abuse was this internalized self-hate. And my critical parent, God bless her, she's a very worn out, tired part of my life. I feel like she was just trying to keep us alive, which she did. I'm here, thank goodness. And my poor inner teen was just so needy and so absent, and my inner child was just, so shut down and scared. And the first few years in ACA, I didn't even know those existed. In fact, I focused on trying to find my true self because I didn't know there was any kids inside. And I was pretty much, willing to take what I could get. Um, and learning to quiet that negative voice, the critical parent, was what relief. That was just the biggest relief to find out that I didn't have to hear that 24/7 telling me that I'm fat, stupid, and ugly. Um, so that was, super, super helpful to me. And that inner loving parent workbook, oh my God. I started a big red book study in person 6 years ago where I live because I was traveling 25 minutes to every meeting I went to, which, was fine in the beginning, but after a while I was like, I need to start a meeting here. So I did start a big red book, and it's when the pandemic hit, it's now on Zoom. So it's still going, and I still belong to that. But I started an inner loving parent meeting in person post pandemic, and the book hadn't even come out. We started with chapter 8 of the big red book, and as soon as we finished that chapter, the other book arrived. So we've been going through that book ever since. So I think it's the third time. I think we're starting on it the fourth time. But that book, oh, when I got rid of my critical parent, I didn't have an inner loving parent, and I didn't have a reference point for it. So it was like, thank God that book was like so detailed and so specific and so able to point me in the right direction for how to be, loving to myself. And it's made a huge, huge difference. I am not the person I was when I arrived almost 14 years ago. I like myself. I actually can say I love myself. I mean, there was that point where it's like, it's just nice to not hate myself, but I don't love myself. But today I can honestly say I love myself. I'm compassionate. I do have connection with my inner teen. I found out that needy, like, oh my God, she had no guidance, no direction, and no help from anybody but the critical parent. That was it. And poor thing, she went through hell. We picked some real difficult relationships based on my experience. And my inner child was, just a bubbly, loving, talk to anybody, want to be friends with anybody, person. And I'm getting to meet her, and she's still got a lot of grief, but I'm happy to say that I'm in touch with her, and I'm, getting better at connecting with her. Um, I just want to talk a little bit about, I don't know what, Renee, how long have I been talking? I feel lost my,
I actually haven't timed you. So
oh,
whenever you feel the need to wrap up, that is absolutely fine.
okay. It looks like I've been talking about 20 minutes. I'm trying to keep track of myself. So, anyway, I wanted to go through the main relationships in my life because that has been the part of my life that really screwed me up the most. So, the relationship with my dad, as I said, his violence, and he was sexually inappropriate. He was drunk. We didn't have any fun, nothing in our life that was enjoyable until he bought a boat later on. And then it was really a terrorizing experience of having somebody drunk drive to this lake in the woods where, going 900 miles an hour while he drunk driving, and then, scaring you to death with fun. So, ugh, that was him. And he died when I was 15, just before I turned 16. And it was kind of hard because people say, "Oh, you lost your dad." And I wanted to say, thank God, because if he didn't go, it was better him than me. And I didn't cry when he died. I didn't feel sad. I was relieved, because that's the kind of person that he was. He terrorized us. Um, my mom ended up getting up to about 400 pounds at the height of her compulsive eating, although I never saw the woman eating. So it's like there was obviously a secret life. She was really mean and cold and unprotective, and just very unbondable too. So I was like, that was really hard. And it's interesting because my oldest brother, they're all, when he was 9 months, my mom got pregnant with the next baby. And then when my next brother was 9 months, she got pregnant with me. But my oldest brother was about 3 when I was born. And so he said he would crawl into my crib when I was crying. And I have a feeling that I got a little bit of attention because of that, but my brother didn't, because he was only 2 when my brother was born, and he was 1. And so my brother, like I said, he looks really good on the outside. He has friends that he's had his whole life. But he had a spiritual experience like I did, but he's turned into a religious fanatic. And so I have no real connection with him because I can't talk about it. Everything is, Diane, you need to read the King James Bible. And if you don't read that particular version of it, you're just not getting it. And and he's politically so far to the right that it's like there's no room. He has all black and white thinking. And it's been hard for me to understand that he was affected by our childhood, and that he too, even though he looks like it on the outside that he fared better, he didn't. He was affected. And so I have to give him grace and realize that I'd love to be close to him, but it's not safe. I can't. And I did try to ask him about a questions because he supposedly had a better memory than anybody in the family. And he was like, no, that didn't happen. And no, and it was your fault. My dad ran me into a dock, because I begged him, please don't go fast at the end. I'm really scared. And he did. And I froze. And anyway, I hit this dock at, I don't know, a god awful amount of speed. And I thought it broke both my legs off. And they didn't take me to the hospital, and they didn't do it. They just threw me in a bed. I had black and blue from my knee all the way around to my other knee. And I realized later through some EMDR that they didn't take me to the doctor because my dad drove truck for a living, and he could have got a DUI for driving drunk on that boat. So I was like, why wouldn't you take this? I mean, I could have been broke, but anyway. But he was like telling me that was my fault. So whew, when I heard that, I was like, wow, it's not safe to talk to him about the past. He's in his own denial about it. And, God bless him. My middle brother, who I felt I identified with the most, he was very damaged. He never had friends. The only friends he had were people that he could outrun him because he was angry, angry, angry. He wouldn't cry when my dad would whip that belt out and start wailing on him. And my dad wouldn't stop until he was going to cry. It was just the most horrible thing. And my mom, although she'd say, Lee, stop it, Lee, stop it, she never stopped him. I don't know if she could. But she never stopped him. And he was super smart and super good looking. He was so good looking that in high school I'd have girls try to be friends with me so they could meet my brother. And I'm sure he was a drug addict and an outlaw and a biker and a sex addict, and he killed himself at 28. So and when he died, I was like, ah. That was the first time I cried. I didn't think I was going to get over it because some part of me so identified with him that I felt if he can't make it, I'm probably not going to make it. And but I'm still here, so that's been a long time ago. The one difference between him and I was I met my very best friend in junior high, Shira Del Rosen, and we became inseparable best friends. She was the only oasis in this hideous, loveless, family. She loved me. She thought I was smart. She thought I was pretty. She thought I was wise. We spent 24/7 together, and she saved my life. If I hadn't had her love, I don't think I would have made it. I would have been just like my brother. I was headed in that direction. Um, and she was a God gift. It was probably the only really healthy, loving relationship. I made my first attachment with her. And she had a normal bohemian life. Her dad was an art teacher, and her mom was a school teacher, and really beautiful Jewish family, bohemian. And I just so wanted to be a part of their family. I was from, like, blue collar truck driver family. So I don't know what she saw in me. I was sure I was fat, stupid, and ugly, which is what um, my dad called my mom all the time, and told me I'm going to be just like her. It's like, ugh. So she was the one difference in my life that my brother didn't get. And then the other difference was around 23, I had this supernatural sort of spiritual experience, which kind of surprised me because I had already grown up in a religious home, and I went, check that off the list. That's not real, and that's just bullshit too. So I thought I'd sort of examine the whole spiritual God thing, but I was drinking and using and brought somebody to my house. And honestly, anybody who came to my house or, connected with me, if you had some belief, I'm like, what do you believe? And, how does that work for you? And then I'd watch your life. And if you look like you were a mess, I'm like, oh, Buddhism, nope, scratch that off. Satan, no, scratch that, like, so that's how I was with it. But this guy, he was like, oh, I'm a backslidden Christian. I'm like, what the hell is that? And anyway, he just said if you ask God into your life, he'll come in. Anyway, I'm like, well, in my mind, I didn't even say it out loud. I'm like, yeah, well, if you're real, come into my life. Boom. I had the most electric experience of my life. It was like pure love, head to toe. I was like, oh shit. I go, I can't be a Christian. I go, I don't like Christians. I don't own a dress. I don't want to be around Christians. I don't even like people. But I'm like, I was so struck by that love. Like, that's something I had wanted my whole life. And I'm like, I hate this. But if that's where, I mean, honestly, if it had been hell, I would have been gone there if it gave me that love. So that was the first time in my life I ever decided to sober up and quit the self-abuse. I hadn't even really tried before that. Um, so that was like a big change. That was the only difference between my brother and killing himself and me, but it was a big difference. And I used to say to God, if you'd have given him what you gave me, he'd still be here. I was kind of mad about that, but it wasn't his path, and I accept it. I don't know the bigger picture. I don't know a lot of things, and I never will. I got a finite mind and an infinite God. So, but anyway, I had tattoos before girls had tattoos. I was like, kind of a outlaw. I hung out with bikers because they had my drug of choice. And so when I became a Christian, it was really hard to fit in because here I had these tattoos and I didn't exactly look like your normal Christian. So it was hard. And I don't know, but I was, that's the first time I got to 12 step, AA and NA and all that business. So it was all good. And the next relationship that I had was a Christian gal who she came to be my roommate, and she had just graduated from Long Beach State. She had a degree in um, recreation. Who knew? So it's like somebody saying, I have a degree in fun and play. So I was like, wow, I have none of that. So you just move right in here. And we became inseparable besties, but it was definitely an emotionally um, codependent relationship, but it saved, and it was another big important relationship because I felt loved and liked and wanted by this person. And for me, being so anxious with people, I couldn't let people in. It was like a one at a time thing. And so I let her in, and she told me I was really smart and that I could go back to college. And I was like, really? So I got my BA and I ended up getting a master's degree, and mostly because I think she believed I wasn't stupid. And I had a 4.0 in my master's degree, but I was still really sure that they were going to find out I'm stupid and that I somehow slipped in here by accident, right? But anyway, that relationship wasn't the healthiest one. And as Christians, I'm sure it wasn't very Christianly. But and so but that and then she ended up moving back to Southern California, which broke my heart as well. But it was, God's brought me these people that changed my life, but they've all been had seasons and they left. And it was always heartbreaking. And then I met my husband, who was 22 years older than me. I met him in AA, and he's Mr. AA, and he was really social and outgoing, and he had grown kids, and they all loved him. I thought, that interests me right there. Um, and I think my inner child really felt safe around him. He was always really generous and kind, and he was always like, "Here, eat. Like I'm going to fix you some food." And my family was like, "Ugh, we have to feed you." Oh my God. So there was some part of me that knew it wasn't a good relationship, but I felt so defective even back then that I thought, well, he's been married a couple times, so I'm not going to screw up his life because he already had a family. So what. I didn't know that at the time. It wasn't conscious, but unconsciously. And I also knew that I could have a needle hanging out of my arm and the man wouldn't notice. He just really didn't notice, which was great in the beginning, very irritating as I decided I wanted to be seen. I'm like, hello, hello over there. Um, but for not being seen, it was great. And it was good. I ended up having my daughter 3 years after I got married, and that was really a wonderful experience. I never dreamed I'd get to be a mom. I was scared to death that I'd screw it up because of what I'd been through, but I just really, really felt like, wow, I'm getting to have the family I never ever had. And I was so excited. And I wish I could say that turned out really wonderful too, but hasn't completely. I won't go over that. But the relationship with my husband, he's got ADHD, and the kind where you have to move around a lot. And I was like, I have this my love language is quality time and gifts. And he would sit down, I'd sit on the couch, and then he'd pop up and he'd leave. Where are you going? And I'm like, I don't know. He didn't even know where he was going, but it's like being married with an alcoholic, except they're not drinking. Because they say they're going to do something, but they can't remember that they said they're going to do it. So it was like, oh my God. And the poor man, he thought he kept marrying younger every time he got married, and he thought he could be controlled these younger women, but he was wrong when he got me. And and he's a little narcissistically wounded. So it was really the world, about him. He was a golfaholic. And so, he's like, I love you, but not as much as golf. And it was a really lonely time. I had my daughter and, raising her, but he was emotionally unavailable, and he's an ACA too. I haven't had any relationships with anybody that aren't either active alcoholics or, we raised the bar by saying you're now a recovering, ACA. And And so we've been married 35 years, but I left about 5 years ago, and we're still like the best of friends. He's the only family I really have, and he would do anything for me. And, he recently had a heart attack and open heart surgery, and I went and stayed with him for a month and a half and helped him recover because that's just what family does. And I don't have any, you know, um, shame around the fact that, hey, I didn't have a normal relationship. I'm lucky to be here. That's all I can say. And yeah, and my daughter, I don't think I'm going to talk too much about her other than I love her. And it's for some reason, I have a granddaughter and I hope that the relationship gets better, but it's not great right now. And there's one other relationship that I want to mention that all of my relationships where these people became super important to me were all snuck in. If they came at me for, open in the open and said, I'm going to be friends with you, I'd have been no way. But they all snuck in. So I met this guy when I was married, and I thought he was gay. I went him on vacation. My husband was on a golf vacation. We were in Mexico, and he was from Canada. And we became pen pals. And like I said, I thought he was gay. He was an art musician, curator, art museum. Anyway, very effeminate, and but he wasn't gay anyway. He was the first person in my life and we had this pen pal relationship where I felt very seen, very liked, very loved. And he didn't like see me in a fantasy way. He said, you're kind of difficult. You're pugnacious. I had to go look that one up. I'm like, what is pugnacious? Well, it means like stubborn and kind of cantankerous. He's right. But he was 3,000 miles away. And for the first time in my life, I felt safe enough to have feelings because I remember when I got to AA and they said that you have an instinct for sex. And I went, I don't think so. Something's missing here. But I realized that in safety, I'm wired normally. In fear, my body doesn't work very well. And it just is what it is. That never ended up becoming anything. And like I was kind of like, well, he's my best friend, but yeah, and my husband were like, "Oh, that's great. Now you won't bug me about playing golf on the weekend." So he was fine with it. It was kind of interesting. But yeah, so those were the three main relationships that I feel like got to my heart, my inner child. And I'd like to say that God too changed my entire life, but it didn't because even though they loved me, I didn't love me. ACA has taught me to love me. That's changed everything. It's helped me to stop looking outside of myself for the special needle in a haystack person to come and do for me what I won't do for myself. So I'm sure I've rambled on. I'm up to 38 minutes here, and I really know that it's more important to hear other people than just to hear myself, and that this was an incomplete share, but I have gotten so much out of this recovery. And if you're new and you think, oh, it's not worth it, I've suffered from depression my whole life, and I'm almost off all my depressants, all off everything, and I feel happy. I'm alive. I have a friendship with somebody that I met in recovery that, I thought was going to be the love of my life. And I think he might have too, but I realized, oh, my teenager isn't ready for this. And neither is neither am I. I'm not old enough to be dating at 68. So anyway, I'm grateful for the connections that I have with people. And I don't feel like I'm looking for what I missed out on. I'm willing to accept what I have, and what I have is pretty damn good considering I shouldn't even be here. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be alive. I'm lucky to be here. So thank you all for listening and letting me talk and trust and feel out loud and be safe. So thanks. That's it. I'm done.